Hey there, welcome to episode 135 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo, as usual, recording this at 8:10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time here in Greater Vegas on Wednesday, June 10, 2026. Today's title and topic, Long Resume Journey, even though it looks like Long Resume Journey. Haha. If you're not familiar with the Quaggling Sand audio program, let me tell you, first of all, Quaggling Sand is a technical term I coined when I was very young. It's probably about 4 years old, maybe, give or take. I honestly don't remember exactly. But I do remember that it's a term that you may be more familiar with when you hear pins and needles. But rest assured, Quaggling Sand is the correct term. In the context of this audio program, it is as though there is a swirling dust devil in the mind, swirling and stirring up memories. And so there are stories, tales, journeys through time, and apparently a long one to my resume, also known as a resume. There is never going to be a guest on this program. It's time to admit that. These are self-serving stories for my own enjoyment and hopefully for yours. It's a way to jot down some ideas from the past, for posterity perhaps, and for you. On that note, hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a brief summary, which I will read to you. And there are 2 additional links. So the 2 normal program links, show links, if you like, and then 2 links for today's episode. So let's get to it so we can get on with the delightful Wednesday that this is. By the way, we do publish new episodes of the Quaggling Sand audio program on Wednesdays, often in the morning. Well, it appears that we'll make it for the morning today on June 10th. So congratulations, me. So let's get started. The summary of today's episode. To avoid the special characters in the title, the simple version, but is it a resume, a resume, a resumé with an accent on the final E, or maybe a résumé with accents on both E's? It is a French word after all. Whatever the case, I think we should be done with them. The Quaggling Sand homepage, Quaggling is spelled Quoggling, sand, SAND.com. That's all I'd say about that. That'll be the primary point of publication one of these days when I have time. You can find this audio program in many other places, so that's good for now. The profile page linking everything at buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. I've had that profile there for, it was 5 years in March. So it's just there. It has links to all of my audio programs, just in case the quagglingsand.com website is not lovely or totally functional. You can always find those links at buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo, as you can find links to all of my audio programs, various projects, affiliate links to some products that I actually use, including my favorite coffees. You don't have to buy me a coffee. You don't have to spend any money. You don't have to click on anything. But just to know it's there makes me feel better. Maybe you too. As luck would have it, the Buy Me an Update audio program is published first at buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo/posts. There's a link to it there already, so you'll find it. The Buy Me an Update audio program is published on Monday mornings. It's 5 minutes or less. It's a quick rundown of the week's previous audio programs and then any news and announcements upcoming. It used to be published exclusively at buymeacoffee.com. That's why it's called the Buy Me an Update audio program. However, that's not where you publish podcasts. So 2 hours later, it gets it gets scheduled to publish in all the usual places, right near where you find all of my other audio programs. So piece of cake. The 2 links for today, of course, at Wikipedia. Wikipedia is always a great place to begin a journey to learn more, but rarely is at the end of that journey. You can see what I mean about the messy if you do look at the link. Resume without the accents on the E's, and then the Wikipedia link has the accents on the E encoded. So you can see it's R%C3%A9, some %C3%A9. So it's not visually appealing, I suppose, but it is necessary to find that article link. So a little backstory on the resume. And then the CV. What is a CV? Well, it's the curriculum vitae, of course. It's something that people think is a resume, but it's a little bit different. So you can read the resume. I'm sorry, you can read the Wikipedia page about the curriculum vitae and the resume and see for yourself. So not a CV. First things first, to be cool, Some, and this included me for a while, so it's not a means to that end, would refer to this thing as a CV or a curriculum vitae. As you can see in the links, and the two are not the same, especially in the US. You can check the two Wikipedia links, but basically a resume is brief and in recent years is typically customized for a particular job role. Some people used to really emphasize being a single page. I always went for the long resume, hence the title of today's episode. So I figured, hey, I have the experience. I'm going to write about it, and you're going to know about it. Over time, the long resume became more into fashion because of so much automated processing of resumes. So it didn't really matter anymore. Obviously, I put the important stuff on the first page, but the long resume. I'm honestly not sure that cover letters even count for anything anymore. The resume is just ingested into a database for searching later. I don't know. It's been a while. I should maybe if I know some recruiters, maybe I'll ask them what they think about cover letters. A CV, on the other hand, is literally a view of life, accomplishments and achievements and other cool things, especially publications and other fame. And it's often given on behalf of, if you're an academic, especially to wherever, your publisher of articles and whatnot. So they have your background information so they can include your CV or information from it when they publish so people know who you are and what your backstory is. Your credibility, I guess, could be attached to that. I don't know that a CV would be customized. Almost certainly not. It's your life story. It's supposed to be much more complete than a resume, so it's probably one and done, or hopefully updated over time. So it was never really correct to label one as the other and vice versa. But it's convenient to say, and it does sound cool. You want my CV? I have to say, I basically did not customize my resume. I've only a small number of times did I ever buy into that, but eventually I just figured it's still me. And once emailing them became the way to get it out to the people and to submit it to the usual platforms like HotJobs and Monster and Dice and all the rest, managing versions would only become something of a nightmare. Though really, all the tools to manage versioned resume documents are well within my reach for myself, but for the normal everyday person, it just started becoming quite cumbersome. The fan out of resume versions, the different platforms and so on, managing who got which version of which resume and all kinds of stuff. Over the years, though, I authored in Word, of course, LaTeX, DocBook. LaTeX, if you don't know, you should. DocBook for transformation as needed, straight HTML, and I forgot WordPerfect in that mix, with media selector layout for a printable version in the HTML. That was my big innovation for my own workflow. I'll make a short visual version, and then if they print it, they'll get the full version. You see one page until you print it out, then you get all 5 or 6 or 8 or however long it got. Plain text even, good for pasting into an email back in the early days. And back and forth as needed between all these. Just that became sort of silly to have to deal with which version of which thing went to which format for transport and sure. The evolution of my resume began back in high school years. If I needed to give someone a resume, I would be hard pressed to fill in an entire page early on. Especially like in junior high. I don't think I ever needed one back then, but who has any experience? Maybe toward the end of high school, maybe towards the end of the document and towards the end of high school, I had a little bit more. The blank space at the bottom would benefit from an inclusion of my AFJ or OTC activities, that job at McDonald's, which is valid, of course, for early work experience. So I'm not putting that down, by the way. I did an episode on all of that previously about how everybody should work in fast food at some point. The other job I had at Fuddruckers, I miss Fuddruckers. I don't think they're barely around. I think they have like 5 locations or something crazy. That job doing alarm installations. So by the end of high school, I did have a few things to fill in the end of the resume, make it look like a full page. But it was sort of a hodgepodge. I mean, it's still the early days. You're just getting started. These are the days before email, of course, certainly before job websites like HotJobs and Monster and so on. So there were more back then. I don't know if they're still around. So a resume would need to be printed on paper and handed over or sent via mail, paper mail, with a stamp and everything. Laser printers were sometimes available at a workplace. I think I encountered my first laser printer when I was, let me think. I think I was a sophomore. Oh, no. I was in 8th grade. Apple Laser Writer. Our junior high school had one, I think, and you weren't allowed to use it. The teacher of the computer class was a super nerd, and it's not even clear that the school purchased it. She might have. So, yeah, who knows? So you had to print it. Sometimes they were available in a workplace. Generally speaking, the rare library might have one that you could, almost like going to a quick copy back then. Nowadays, it's FedEx office, I think. But basically, you could find a laser printer somewhere, maybe if you were lucky. Maybe not so much. We happen to have a fairly decent, not perfect, but a fairly decent, it was a C-ITO. Who even knows if that exists anymore? C-ITO dot matrix printer that did a decent job on nice paper with offset overstrike prints. So it's a dot matrix. I think it was 9 pins, but it would shift the paper by like 1 pin or half a pin or something. And so you get a fake extra bit of resolution there. It looked nice. It looked not bad. The printed version looked okay because of all this. Authored in WordPerfect at the time on my old Apple IIe. It wasn't really mine. Our old Apple IIe, in fact. So back in the day, I should point out a resume was not always essential in that part of my career, of course. McDonald's did not require a resume. So these were arguably CVs at that early stage. I mean, what's the real difference? They do look similar, so we can chalk that up to potential confusion later. I always thought it was a CV. My life story, as brief and boring as it was to that time frame, but it was good to have a resume ready, and this habit would come in handy in the Silicon Valley years to come down the road. When I was in 8th grade, Silicon Valley would be a mere 9.5 years away. I should point out, I already did that. I did point out that. On to the next section. Through college, that was a completely different time. In college, there were job opportunities through the year and in the summers, of course. So having a proper resume reflecting academic progress, special projects, my skills as they continued to increase in number, and my interests, which also, I guess they did increase in number as well. And again, as much filler for the bottom half as possible, although that was getting a little bit easier to do by then. All of this was a reasonably good idea. We actually had access to reasonable print resources, so laser printing was a possibility. But at the same time, the early days of emailing this stuff around were upon us, so both were good to prepare for. Having an emailable resume was a good idea. My summer job on returning home from my first year at college was my first programming job, my first legitimate programming job, not programming for a friend or all this. So using the C programming language, as a matter of fact, the first time I had to learn C to have this, to do the work for this job. And the project was focused, so that was another thing on my resume. And the project was focused on parsing word processing documents in various deposition formats from attorneys' offices, output as plain text. So they were authored on different word processors, output in different deposition formats, but as text files. With some of the, they all had the similar block layout. The block layout and the overall document structure remained intact in just the normal plain text form. So they weren't really laser printable to look nice. So just the data, but it was still a little bit different between each one. And my project for that summer was to come up with a way to parse each different format, different layout, different block structure, and all that, and extract data from the documents. So it was actually rather informative when it came to working out the preferred formats or maintaining and distributing a resume. Kind of a similar problem. Of course, not everyone on the receiving end would have had the same preferences as I came up with. So everybody wants something different. But this is the part of the resume problem in general. Do you want to? Well, I'll get to that. While I started out using Microsoft Word in college to maintain a serviceable copy of my resume, I would eventually learn how to use LaTeX. That's spelled capital L, small a, big T, small e, big X, to generate a typeset output LaTeX is used by some to create books and other complicated documents with figures and charts and pretty much anything you can imagine appearing on the printed page, exactly where it should be on the page, on each page. That would turn into PostScript for printing and conversion to plain text for emailing, though at some point PDFs, portable document format, would come a long way to bridge that gap. Fun fact, a PDF is actually PostScript that would go to the printer, but it's embedded in a file for display on a screen. That's why they look like they do on paper when you publish with PDF. They're still a pain though. Cooking with gas, my favorite. Arriving in Silicon Valley with a couple of technical experience blocks on my resume, a couple from school, and some actual skills to go with my academic projects, it would become important, and then more important, to have a decent looking resume on hand. Usually to hand to someone, in fact. A nice block format, skills, experience, and then education. That was sort of standard. The skills would hopefully be growing consistently, so having those up at the top, at the front, on the front page. Strangely, the objective, I was kind of old school. The objective seems to have fallen away, or it's become less interesting, perhaps. That was on there. Objective, skills, experience, and then the education at the bottom with the projects. How could my resume not be longer than 2, 3, then 4, and so on pages? One never knew what was coming up next in the job market, so that made sense back then to have that format. Your skills mattered because the jobs you had could be wild and varied, but what did you get from that? There are better ways to portray that today, perhaps. And we were still passing a paper resume around now and then. More than once, I left a paper resume on my manager's chair, either for a friend or a friend of a friend, and I sometimes asked that others did the same for me, and they did. It was a lingering referral system that was reaching the end of its days, but still hanging on until that end. Nowadays, you're lucky if somebody will even look at your resume. Believe it or not, LinkedIn wouldn't launch until May of 2003. So when I arrived in Silicon Valley 10 years before, there was a lot to do in those pre-LinkedIn days. Those were the best of times, I think, which was a decade after I landed in the Valley. As I just mentioned, I should read ahead, which meant adopting those early emailing days, handing the paper to someone during a lunch meetup, or maybe having the document available online somewhere. That was innovation back then. Converting to HTML and posting on a personal website was relatively easy back then. Converting from some formats to HTML was reasonable. Learning to tweak HTML was a good skill anyway, so that was another format to maintain. That is, what looked good for a paper output might not be ideal for a PDF, which might require some tweaking for HTML layout, and et cetera, et cetera. This was in the table layout days to boot, which was less fun. While I was in college, I had heard of people using something called FrameMaker for large document construction. You could publish books with this, and similar to LaTeX or LaTeX. And it was before I departed my first tour in Silicon Valley that I would learn DocBook, which was sort of an XML take on FrameMaker, which used an SGML version of this notion of a base document. It was one way from the FrameMaker tier of document editing. So in that school of thought, to maintain a single source document in a heavily structured way, but in the source document, which could then be transformed and actually, because of the work of so many people that were into this, pretty easily into a LaTeX document that could be converted to a directly printable output, or a text document, maybe a restructured text document, which today would actually be a markdown document. Restructured text is a little bit more old school. So you could do a lot of things. And of course, HTML. It was easier to do. It was easier by then to unify the presentation, so the HTML would be useful without additional tweaking. So it would just look pretty much okay when you did the transformation from DocBook to HTML, which made maintaining that source document without special adjustments to the different outputs more straightforward. So yeah, now I could publish different formats from one base format in a standard way. It was a little bit less work, but it turns out it was still more work. It was still kind of a pain, but that's how you got jobs. But that was the way. So the always on resume was about to become my future With the HTML resume, it was pretty easy to have a link to share with anyone, anywhere to view or download it. So meeting someone in a social setting or at a different company site or pretty much wherever, could easily become a yes answer to, can you send me a copy of your resume? I would say, oh, you can have it right now. I'll send you an email at this moment, and it's online, and you can download it whenever you want. And to be honest, early on, that got some raised eyebrows, like, oh, that's a cool idea. A bit of a game changer, really. And when I moved to Phoenix for 4 years to try something completely different, that was right before 9/11, of course. The job boards were rising, especially in a post 9/11 world. So that would be shortly after I moved, where the job market was in a bit of a shambles. All of the gains in document portability would slip away as the sites I keep mentioning, Hot Jobs, Monster, Dice, there were a bunch more, and still others. And then some companies would require that you submit your resume to their system on their website. So you could, more filling in HTML forms. It all seemed to have their own resume entry forms, as I said. But they were all a little bit different. But I already submitted my resume to Monster. Well, you're going to have to submit your resume directly to our HR department in a slightly different way. Breaking each previous experience into a new block with start and end dates, description, company location, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you had to basically, I already have all this information. Well, you're going to have to fill it in again. It was not great, but it was also tedious in addition to not being great, or to being not great. With job boards in full swing, it was easy to apply to jobs all day. Just find a job, submit resume, apply for job, apply for position, whatever the different platforms called it, different things when you click the button. I recall printing out my Hot Job submissions over the summer of 2002 at some point to reflect on how dismal things were. Numbering in the hundreds. I think at one point there was 500, 550, no responses. There was this, we're not even going to bother responding and telling you to go jump in a lake. Occasionally a job listing would want the resume sent directly in Word format, of course, got to be in Word, which obviously meant the contact info would be stripped off with their candidate tracking system. And most likely the actual document would be sucked into a database for later use. The tracking system would pull out your skill keywords and so on. While nowhere near the insanity we are experiencing directly or vicariously today, the beginnings of automated no-response job shops were upon us, certainly. And this was I was in Phoenix until 2005, and it just seemed like it was getting a little bit worse throughout that time period. I think it was in the 2002 timeframe. So I moved to Phoenix in 2000. It was August of 2001. Perfect timing. So it was in the 2002 timeframe that I started seeing a push toward custom resumes. Write a resume that fits the job description. I had heard this suggestion over the years. Oh, maybe you should change your resume to focus more on a particular interest area or skill set. So, all right, I'll have a second version. But usually this took the form of a single resume and then a cover letter. That was really the more common way. You do a little personal marketing, highlight the things in particular, some aspects of the resume and the personal background that might align nicely with the job description of under discussion, but you would do it on the cover letter. So that was the first thing people would see, and then they'd flip through your resume. But there was a move away from cover letters and toward a custom resume. I'm not a fan. So my idea sprang to me. It was somewhere in here that I started seeing just how bad the matching, I'll get to the idea in a second, how bad the matching scheme was getting with all this automation. There were a lot of people looking for jobs, hundreds of jobs submissions per person per day, sometimes thanks to job websites and whatnot. As I said, I did 546 during a summer, but that number would only increase with some people just doing that. You could do 100 in a day if you were really motivated. And how many thousands of incoming resumes per job role? The move towards fully automated filtering and then matching was inevitable. So filter the resumes into bins, match potential candidates, put them all in a database for future potential outreach, which never happened. The only problem, it wasn't very good. If the person driving the candidate search did not know the lingua franca of the particular job role to match skills and experiences against, the matches would become silly in some cases or tragic in others. My go-to favorite story from this time: as a software engineer in Silicon Valley, I certainly developed utility software to be used internally as part of the development process of particular software products that we were working on. And I was, of course, fully engaged with the system architecture. When I received an extremely long email, it was a very large job description, went on for pages, from an ill-informed headhunter, that's what we call recruiters, for a job working with architectural design of a utility plant. Oh, they thought I was an architect and I worked on utility buildings. I knew the matching skills of this headhunter were subpar. They clearly didn't understand the context of either the job description nor my resume. Silly in this case, but imagine that sort of thing happening in the other direction, completely missing ideal candidates for incorrect keyword selections. A net tragedy, to be sure. And I'm not kidding. That is tragic that you would be passed over because someone didn't know what the words meant. Oh, I don't know anything. I'm just trying to find people and I get paid for that. It was indeed the worst of times. And I don't know if it's gotten better. It was around this time I came up with the resumé-dar notion. Resumé-dar. Like radar. Maybe the name isn't quite right. Maybe, I don't know, who knows. But the idea was to enable job seekers like myself to post a resume or a link to a resume, which is an important deviation. I could keep my resume and not hand it over to people to be edited and so on. They could still download it and edit it, but I would always have my version of my resume and not have to distribute it around and customize it and all this. Or I could even keep a couple of versions of my resume if I really wanted to. But the idea was to enable job seekers like myself to post a resume with the link and then include the keywords and specific details on which a match was desired. So rather than combing through my resume to find keywords, you would match the keywords that I want to be matched on. The design would be such that the utility and the architecture misuse I ran into could be avoided with some tighter match constraints in the search and filter process, or filter and search process maybe. Your application may vary, even for someone who did not know the best keyword choices. As I was pondering how this could work, LinkedIn came into the scene in the summer of 2003. It was actually in May, early May, I think. And so resumé-dar hit the back burner, but it's still something I think is needed, but not exactly in the form I described. 2 more sections. So LinkedIn was released upon the world. There were 2 important aspects of LinkedIn way back then, back in 2003. I would move back to Silicon Valley in 2005, so I had some time. Time with it in Phoenix. First, my profile page was my resume. I mean, for everyone. So I could see what others were seeing. Editing was straightforward, and it had the feel of a better solution than Hot Jobs and Monster and the other offerings that I've mentioned. Even Indeed, which I thought was fairly brilliant and which had come out around the same time, maybe a little bit, maybe like a year. I could look up the exact date, but it was somewhere around the same time. It was an interesting take. Basically, it kind of flipped the job seeker's role to look for jobs that were actually matches, sort of like resumé-dar, but the job posts were searchable in a more useful way for the time. So they would aggregate job postings and you could search through all of them at the same time instead of trying to find job posts in all these different job boards or in other places. So I think Indeed was a pretty good idea. It's turned to garbage over the years, but what hasn't? The second thing with Monster and the others, there was a detachment of sorts. The recruiters and the headhunters were somewhere else. With LinkedIn, we could connect to former and current colleagues, which is also kind of a piece of brilliance. You could connect with classmates, which also kind of displaced classmates.com and other. Some of the original features would take some time to emerge into what LinkedIn would become a decade or so ago. The old LinkedIn and the modern LinkedIn are probably different than I am remembering by a wider margin, but there was a lot of cool features just as it was getting started, making referrals and searches that much more relevant. No need to print out a resume and leave it on a chair or point people to my HTML resume. Resumes, or experience profiles, I guess, I don't know what they actually called them back then or now, became the connection points, always a part of the conversation as needed, but directly. So it was a good idea. I had moved. I had moved around a lot during my first tour in Silicon Valley, so 1993 to 2001. Once LinkedIn came along, there was what I called a live business card at our disposal. Now you could just know where I'm working if I updated it, which I did, which made reconnecting with some former colleagues easier for my second tour when I moved back to Silicon Valley, and which made it generally easier to remain reachable into the future and to remain in contact with former colleagues and so on. I think it was the acquisition by Microsoft that set up LinkedIn for its descent into AI madness today, with its current form quite different from its old self. I don't really like LinkedIn anymore. So many optimization rules to be seen, automated feed generations based on who knows what. Now people use it as a social network. So they're posting pictures and selfies. They have the LinkedIn paragraph structure. No more than one sentence per paragraph, please, and be sure to double space. And it sure seems the picture matters in the news feed more than the experience profile content. So you got to have a picture, especially if you're looking for a job. I would say LinkedIn has turned a good idea, like a really good idea, into a pile of garbage. And I'm being kind, but it's my opinion. Your mileage may vary. So now we find ourselves in modernity, for better or worse. At this point, in less than 4 years from the original launch of ChatGPT, I think it was November of 2022. Thank you. I think it was November 30th, in fact. And now its many competitors are making authoring and maintaining a resume a chore left to a large language model. The same goes for writing the descriptions for job requirements. Humans need not bother authoring anything here. Just let the LLMs arrive at matches. And then you can offer an automated AI interview to filter out candidates. Then there's no need to have any human interaction to get from job application to rejection. Yay. At least they can automate the rejections, so you'll get something. They probably still won't. Upholding the tradition. I still see people using resumes and job descriptions, but I think those days are numbered, and I think it's probably to sort of be inclusive of kind of the old school thinkers, maybe habits. Not the people. The numbered days are not for the people as far as I know, but these anachronisms, they got to go. But still not the people. Let's keep the humans around just a little bit. I have found that most people don't actually skim over a LinkedIn profile when you connect, or if they just kind of look at the top. They rely on a minimal amount of introduction at the top of the profile page. Maybe they see where you are, your current location, if you provide it. They look at a picture, they see your little sort of tagline, and that's probably good enough. That's like 100% of the interactions I have with people. Did you see on my profile that I worked here? Oh no, I didn't notice. Maybe recruiters look over the details of the profile, the experience and so on a little bit more, but LinkedIn has an AI-based match tool set for that sort of thing. Kind of obviates the recruiter spending time in those early stages of collecting candidates to consider. Those who do create resumes are, from what I've observed, going with a skills resume now, more so, emphasizing what they can do, not what they have done and for whom, and where and for whom. And then stuffing it full of keywords, like a lot of keywords. One-page resumes have been out for a while. I think people have realized that, that we're passing these digital documents around. It's no longer going to take up extra space on your desk in a file folder. It's pages and pages with more keywords. The more keywords, the better, in fact. AI doesn't care whether it's creating this document or reading it to filter candidates. It's just tokens. Maybe at some point it will be the same tool for both, and we need not do these steps at all, and they will just fade away. In fact, personally, I think we might end up with a sort of a personal AI agent, or whatever they might be called, after the bubble pops and everything moves closer to eventual reality and a little bit more practical and so on. And a candidate searcher agent. So you have a little agent representing you and an agent representing the job, and they'll find each other. They'll find my job seeker agent. They can chat amongst themselves, and if you're worthy, maybe they'll get you a call from a robot. It's sort of like a Hollywood agent representing actors, right? That's all we are anyway. And if you are worthy, you'll get that call from that robot, maybe. The classic resume intended to be read by another human is basically out. Why bother? These don't scale and require maintenance. I went through some of the maintenance steps. It's kind of tedious. You only update your resume possibly every couple of months. Some people every couple of years, and yet it's still something under a cloud of virtual dust, or a layer of virtual dust, and then a cloud of dust above that. So it becomes a chore, and you're like, can't I just talk to a human and describe myself? And nope. No. Maybe your job seeker agent representing you out in the world will just have some idea who you are and what you can do, and it will behave like your actual agent, and it'll be repping you out in the to the rest of the robots to get you employed, so you can pay for more tokens, which is the most important part. Who knows? But I say good riddance to these the old classic resume. There are better ways with AI, or not. There really are. That's probably about it. I'm not a fan of the resume, as you may have picked up on. I think, and there are too many formats. They all look different. People try to compete on, I'll make mine look cooler so it stands out in the pile. But then you have should I do a skills base? Should I do a functional resume? Should I do a chronological resume? People should describe what they're looking for in the job description. Hey, if you're going to send a resume, here's what we're looking for. Even better, perhaps, they could just provide the match criteria. Wouldn't that be easier? And I'm super disappointed in Indeed. Indeed, like I said, was kind of a brilliant idea, the way they did it. A one-stop shop to try and to find job listings that were potentials. Still had the same problem, no responses from anyone. Like, I was a perfect match for this job. It didn't have my name in it, but it may as well have. It didn't really matter. But nowadays, Indeed is the same sort of garbage that you'll find in every other website that's been around for too long. So I'll have to put that on my resume. That's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for listening, as always. I hope you enjoyed this snippet, a little tiny view into my, uneventful, curiously entertaining. Pick some words, whatever suits you to describe these reflections, retrospections, whatever the case. Anyway, don't forget buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. You don't have to spend any money, but there are links to all of my other programming. Check them out. Maybe you'll like some of the other stuff I produce every day. That's it. That's all I got. Take care now. Until next week. Bye-bye.